talk now about the next section of my resume, purpose and goals. I discussed that I've worked with security program deployment, and if you've seen any of my other videos, I have both reviewed security awareness, provided training. I've defined the security roles, and I've always obviously been in a security role and have to conduct myself with continuous and continuing training. But I've also made sure that both of these were enacted and provided to all the other system staff. The difference here between awareness and training is that awareness is just very generic for everybody in the enterprise and maybe possibly related to the system specifically. However, the next two, which are from a set of different controls, there needs to be defined security roles, as well as those persons with security responsibilities need to have specific training for both the system and their security responsibilities, but also related to their discipline. In other words, system administrators are going to have system administration, Unix or Linux or Windows training, things like that. Developers will learn how to be taught how to code properly, do code security assessments and things like that. So I've made sure that those were identified and verified, and identified gaps and recommended improvements, those types of things. I've also implied, or have implemented, I should say, controls and countermeasures. Some of my other history has been with technical disciplines, networks, and other system-specific items. But I've also worked in policies and different controls, interpreting the controls to make sure that they're applicable to the system. And that's one of those processes that goes into risk management also, as you'll see and hear from me in other videos that I talk about. Metrics and monitoring is one that is gaining a lot of press, a lot of interest and importance now, and some of that is related to security monitoring, like intrusion detection, things like that, but also change controls and other items that traditionally have been the method for metrics. Metrics in security seem to be sort of wishy-washy at best. To go from a program manager's perspective, you at least need to have schedule, performance, and technical resources, as well as quality. And quality probably is one of those overlaps between security and other aspects of project management type of metrics. So, but also when talking as to compliance, there are metrics that can be fabricated, and by that I mean that they can be generated according to the compliance status and the security posture of the system. It just takes some finesse and knowing how to gather those metrics together. Degree of participation, degree of compliance, controls success and control fail percentages can be monitored, as well as the 6 or so security states. They can also be graded and shown as a metric. Those states that we monitor for and that we try to implement are things like confidentiality, authenticity, integrity, availability, usability, and ownership issues. And you can say, for example, if you need to have secrecy in addition to just confidentiality, you could add that as another security posture, and you can measure those. And I'll show some illustrations in the future as to how to work those. That can be started with something as simple as spreadsheets, can be developed in SharePoint, which I have done, and also using of a variety of security data management systems, CFAX, TAF, Trusted Agent FISMA that is, EMAS, Exacta are some of the names that may be in this, may be utilized. But they can also be emulated. Those products can also be replicated in spreadsheets as well as in SharePoint. And as I said, you can see if you're going down the list of my resume, I've also just talked to the level of adherence to these standards and frameworks. Other frameworks other measurements can also be used, such as controls. as I just stated. But you can use, other than FSMA, there are controls that are applicable, available from COBIT, and from other frameworks like HIPAA, etc. So you have to find which is applicable, and you just have to be able to take those parameters and record them as metrics to see how compliant you are, and measure performance. That's a good starting point, at least. Talked about risk management framework earlier in my prior video. This time I'm really talking a little bit about risk management as to the risk calculation. And there are various versions of that risk calculation, that formula. The simplest has 3 or 4 parameters. Risk is the result, and you want to get that resulting risk as low as possible. The first factor is threats, which are actors acting against you, the hackers, if you want to use that term. Do you see my air quotes? Or hackers? There we go. And then also the second parameter is vulnerabilities, which are system weaknesses, and I've discussed that extensively in the videos on POA&Ms. Another factor would be cost, and that's resources, money especially, but also resources and effort that has to be put into defending against or mitigating that risk, that threat, I should say, or that vulnerability. And additional factors can play into this also, depending upon how refined you want to be. And additionally, there are different approaches to risk. There are a great number of different types of risk, and they are identified, anything from program risk, cost risk, financial risk, etc. But when I'm speaking here, I'm speaking mostly to the security risk and to system risk. So POA&Ms, again, are worked into the factor here, and by determining what vulnerabilities and threats you can mitigate or protect or defend against with countermeasures, that's how you can reduce your risk. So that's can be very complex. You can do that in a simple high, medium, low 3x3 grid. Some organizations that I've gone with have defined likelihood in not likely, negligible, very likely, highly likely. They can also describe the impact as just, like I said, red, yellow, green, or you could go into the very likely, extremely disastrous, nationally disastrous, those kinds of thing, or incidental. So again, so you have to work on, figure out which framework and the degree of granularity there. Additionally, I'll talk about some of my program management in addition to this risk management stuff. The project management factors that I've been involved in obviously are the deliverables, which is the security documentation package. Simply starting with the security plan, the SSP, with contingency plans, disaster plans, and those types of supplemental plans, risk assessment, system risk assessment documentation of that sort, which goes through in detail about the threats and the vulnerabilities, etc., and explains that for the system. And there's a great number of other documents that could be associated. There are FIPS 189 and FIPS 200, which speak to, for the first one, rather speaks to the controls implemented and the system categorization documents. Depending upon the data in the system, you can also include privacy impact assessments, authentication assessments, e-authentication, categorization, as I mentioned, and so forth, that will fill out the package. And all of these contribute to giving a good story and a good explanation, paints the picture of the security posture and the operation of the system also. And speaking of security posture, I think I may have mentioned this several times herein, but also within the other videos, or the earlier resume video related to myself here, as well as other security master videos. There are several postures that need to be monitored. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are obvious in the FSMA realm. FSMA doesn't include authenticity, which is also explicit. This is also known as, or part of this is known as non-repudiation. This is not the same as the other factors. System ownership type of and physical aspects are also another posture that need to be addressed and enumerated separately. And as I may have mentioned, if you're into high degree of data secrecy, may also in high severity data, you may need secrecy as another parameter. So there are roughly 5 to 7 parameters that should be monitored on a regular basis, and to show how each of them may be improving or hopefully not decreasing in their quality. But also getting into other things, like I said several times, project management type of things, scheduling, in addition to the documents, scheduling deployments, coordinating between scans and deployment of patches, implementing upgrades, tracking the milestones for plan of action and milestone, the POA&Ms, adding quality, adding processes, and different things that are involved in the overall scope of project management, in addition to risk and the documentations. Engaging with the stakeholders, and in some cases the stakeholders may be quite disparate. They may be distributed both politically as well as geographically. There's technical staff, there's management staff, as well as security staff, and each of them may have different or overlapping or matrixed chains of command. So that gets into your political risk, to say the least. Additionally, talking about policies and procedures, I've said several times that usually policies start off at the top level of the organization, at the enterprise or department level. But they need to be boiled down and distilled, and providing some guidances and white papers, installation guides, procedures on which the system level staff would be able to implement. And that takes a lot of translation. And again, translation is one of those things that are one of my exceptional high points, is that I can take something and take security, take a system and translate the security there for program managers and executives. I can translate that into the speak so that POA&Ms could be understood by the system technical staff, and vice versa. So those are all the kinds of things that, again, go to the overall security management. If you're following along in my resume, I've done some things here. I've said some things earlier that have overlapped, so kind of going to jump around here, but still nonetheless gives you the full story. I don't want to duplicate. Again, developing the level of compliance. You can't tell the level of compliance if I haven't already said it explicitly. I'll say it now. It's hard to determine the level of compliance and the quality of the system by the security plan itself. The security plan is probably just a document. Some cases it may be a spreadsheet. If it's a spreadsheet, at least you can track some numbers. If it's a Word document, you're going to have a hard time determining what the real quality and security is of the system. So you need to put that into a application, whether that's an Excel or SharePoint or a security data management, in order to be able to do that, to know what you have to mitigate, to know where your risk reductions need to be done. Otherwise, you're just highlighting with a yellow marker all over 200, 300, 400 pages of an SSP, and it just gets to be ineffective. And there's other things I'll throw off on the top end here as I get close to the end here. A few other oddities. I've spoken in other videos about the controls, which could be system specific. They may be inherited or common. Is the terms, those are fairly synonymous, and those common controls are provided by a higher organization such as the enterprise. Hybrid would stand somewhere in between, are shared responsibility, and so you have to pay real close attention to those. Some examples of places for common controls, or inherited controls as they're sometimes called, synonymous terms there, would be networks or communication providers if the system is not a network itself. Facility and infrastructures, all the power, air conditioning, lights, and plumbing, that stuff can be inherited. Other supporting services such as facility engineering and emergency services also, depending upon the size of your system and that's being evaluated here, those could also be considered for common or inheritance or hybrid, depending upon how they're put into effect. And that alleviates the issue for the system operator itself. However, that depends also that the other party, if the system is inheriting networks from somebody else, that network system has to be good in their documentation, and they have to say, we are providing the service to somebody else. Now, for a network organization, they may not have a service level agreement or a memorandum of understanding. They may want to provide a service catalog, which is one of those terms that comes out of ITIL. So again, you have to, it's one of those things where I have to translate from network data center speech, which is like ITIL, into security speech, which is service level agreement, and those types of things. So and into communication security agreement, the ISA, which is another one of those documents that can be important, especially if there's a lot of different networks, and that goes to the complexity of the system. But anyways, until I progress further down my resume, I'll talk to you later.